6 weeks. That's all the time Stu Friedman had worn a badge before New York City tried to kill him. He was 21 years old, fresh out of the academy, patrolling a transit system that ran through some of the most dangerous ground in America. What happened next would follow him for the rest of his career.
It was about 1:30 in the morning. I was on the subway platform. It was a super hot night. It was August. There was terrible heat. I was sweating profusely. I didn't wear my bulletproof vest because it was so hot. Back then, they weren't issued. I had bought my own. And I had a backup gun, which I always carried. Learned that from my brother who was previously on the job.
You know what we call that in the 4.6, right? The Bronx reload.
Bronx reload, that's right.
Just pull another gun out of your pocket.
So I was standing on the platform, and I heard some people coming down. I thought it might be my sergeant. So I put my hat back on, stood there. And the two of them started talking near the token booth. And the token booths back then were just wood with iron bars in the front so you couldn't put your hand in. And one of the guys jumped over the turnstile and ran to me. And I was shocked. And the first thing that crossed my mind was that this might be a setup because back in those days, as you might recall, the Black Liberation Army was assassinating police officers. And they had killed a transit officer a year before and officers from the 3-2 precinct. You know, this was something that was taught to us in the academy. So I didn't believe him at first, but the guy said, this guy has a gun, he just shot at me, and he showed me a bullet hole in his shirt. So I told the guy, take your hands out of your pocket. And, you know, I didn't even think about drawing my gun or anything like that, because I'm, like you said, I'm a rookie, I'm a baby. I don't know. And he did take his hands out, but in his right hand was a small revolver, and he pointed at me and said, don't do it. And it's funny because, you know, I grew up on Western TV shows, and I used to practice drawing my from my holster like I was in a Western, and that's exactly what I did. And I'll tell you, the training that I took in the academy at the range, it kicked right in. I bladed my body to make a smaller target. I put my left arm up in front of my chest to protect my vital organs, and I just fired. But he had fired first. I actually heard the bullet like whiz past me. You know, it passes you before you actually hear it. You know, you see the flash, and then you hear the bang. And it's funny because in the academy they told you, if you hear the bang, you're okay. You didn't get hit. And I saw two flashes. I heard one whiz go by me, and then I fired 2 rounds and fired 2. He began to move up towards the staircase. He turned, he fired again. I fired 2 more. He ran up the stairs. I was in pursuit now on the staircase, and I fired 2 more at him. And then he buckled and turned, and I thought that he was going to shoot at me again. But the problem was he got hit. I didn't know it at the time. And I turned and I jumped down 14 stairs, which you can never do if I wanted to, but, you know, the adrenaline kicks in. I landed on my feet, rolled over, reloaded, called for assistance, 1013, ran up the stairs, and they found him laying in the street, shot twice. And fortunately for me, the booth clerk had called as soon as the shots were fired, so I could hear the sirens coming from the background, which is a great sound when you need help, you know that.
How far did he make it with the 2 rounds in him?
He only made it about 10 feet before he collapsed.
Okay, once he got up the steps off the platform.
And the funny part was, I grabbed him, I rolled him over, I started searching him. I want the gun. There was no gun to be found. So, you know, I started to worry about these things. But a witness came over and said, oh, a girl picked it up and ran down the street. So, you know, yeah, but you've heard the saying, gun never hits the ground.
Absolutely, bounces right into someone else's holster.
You know, the radio cars came, the sergeant said to me, you know, where's the gun? I said, but I couldn't find the gun. He says, did he have one? I said, yeah, they fired me. You know, I got anxious, you know. And I said, ask the clerk, he saw everything. So they got down, they got my witness, everything was good. We went to the 2A precinct, but unlike in today's world of policing, where they would put me on modified assignment, take my gun, put me behind a desk. Chiefs would show up. District attorney might show up. Oddly enough, I sat at the precinct. A duty captain came maybe 3 hours later. Asked me if I ate. Am I comfortable? I said, yes. He spoke to my PBA delegate who I had called. He said, everything look good? Yeah, everything looks great. He said, okay, tell me what happened. And I told him the story, and he said, okay, that's pretty good. He looked at his watch, and he said, you got a rush hour condition at 7 o'clock. Make sure you do the rush hour condition. Good job. And that was it.
He gave you your assignment for the next morning.
I was right back to work the next day as if nothing happened. And another thing with that case was the guy was a hospital arraignment because I had hit him in the hand and I hit him in the leg and it shattered his femur or something. He almost passed away just from the shot in the leg. But he survived, and he was wanted in New Jersey for homicides and store stick-ups, supermarket stick-ups in particular. And he went back to Jersey, was extradited, and never even faced trial in New York, and never heard about it again. I heard that he was sentenced to 25 to life in Jersey.
Stu Friedman was still walking a beat that could turn on him without warning. Even off duty, even out of uniform. The job never really clocked out.
Even in 1981, I was shot. I was off duty. I was with my partner Tom. We were in a robbery squad at the time. We happened to be off duty, but it was 1:30 in the morning again, and we're driving down Taylor Avenue in the Bronx, and we see 3 guys cross in front of my car. Now, I'm only, at the time, I was 27, and they were in their young 20s, and I see them go into a building as an older man, older at the time being 40, walking in. And then we said, looks like they're going to rob this guy, because they ran, as soon as he entered the vestibule, they jogged into the building. We said, we're going to stop. We stopped. We got out. I was in my private vehicle. We got out, went into the building, and then 3 of them were on the top of this guy beating him up. So we thought for sure this is a robbery. We drew our guns, identified ourselves, put them up on the wall. Well, it turned out it was a retaliatory beating because he had thrown him out of a club the night before for wearing sneakers. He was a bouncer at a club. So, of course, we don't want to get involved with this. The guy didn't want to press charges. So we just let everybody go. We put our guns away, shields away, get back in my car, drive down the street, go around the block. And as we get to the intersection of Westchester and Thierret, car came in front of mine, kind of like purposely. Went through a stop sign to cut us off, made a left turn, which put his car facing the opposite direction of mine. So we're door to door. And I recognized it to be one of the guys that was in the hallway. And he's telling me, motion with his hand, put down the window. And I put up my hands like, what do you want? And I see a gun come up. So I pulled up my arm to protect my face, and I start hearing the shots. And I get hit, and my body moved, and my body felt on fire. The glass of my window shattered. He hit my door, my window, and my headrest. And the one that hit me in the arm traveled up into my chest, and my body I felt the heat. But I didn't feel hurt. I felt angry. I jumped out of the car, and I left the car in drive rather than put it in park. It starts to roll, and so Tommy got out, of course, drew his gun, but the car knocked him off balance. So I was going to shoot at the car, but what happened was there was a female in the car with him who yelled out his name. Don't do it. Don't do it. She was screaming, and she kept screaming his name, so I had the name. I caught the license plate number, and then I had to jump back in my car before it struck the L pillar that were underneath the L train. And, Tommy said, you all right? I said, no, I'm hit. And he said, get in the car. He pushed me in the car, and he said, where you hit? I said, I don't know. I didn't know where I was hit because, the bullet traveled into my chest, but I had pain at that point. Once the adrenaline knocked down, I said, my whole body hurts. So he drove me to Jacoby, got to the hospital. The guy, we didn't catch him that night, but we were able to track the plate. The plate went back to a car in Suffolk County, came back. The people had no idea who he was. And, back in those days, you could register a car, you could get phony licenses. It was a whole different system. There was nothing was computerized. So they came back. Another precinct guy found the car had been burnt, but on the windshield, the inspection sticker was still visible. In New York, you have your inspection and your registration stickers on the windshield. So they traced the inspection sticker to a truck back in Hunts Point Market. Went to the Hunts Point, not myself, but detectives went to the Hunts Point Market, found that the company had 6 trucks. They looked at the trucks. One of the trucks was missing an inspection sticker. They said, who drives these trucks? And they had the drivers. They said the same driver drives the same truck all the time. Who is the driver of this truck? His name was Joey. They said, Joey called in sick today.
And was Joey the name? The woman was screaming in the car.
Exactly what she was yelling.
Wow. The inspection sticker ID number That little series of numbers on it, that's a good one.
So that's how they knew who it was. They went to the neighborhood, and he was a wannabe mob guy. He was a young guy. He was trying to make an impression. And the worst way to do that is to shoot a cop back in those days. He was kind of managed after that. But with a lot of pressure on the neighborhood, you know how it goes when a cop is shot.
That was not the only gun pointed at Stu Friedman off duty. 4 years earlier, on a quiet stretch of 146th Street, he came within 2 feet of finding out just how much luck factors into staying alive. This time, there would be no warning at all.
In 1977, I was, again, off duty. I had just left the command on 146th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. That's where I worked out of Transit District 3. I came up the subway stairs to go get my car, and I was stepping out with this guy that was a senior officer, about 8 years on the job. And he wasn't an arrest guy, he wasn't an active guy, and we were just talking. And the reason I wasn't with my partner, Tom, he was on a phone call. And I said, I'm not going to wait, I got to get home. And it was about 8 o'clock or so at night, and I looked across the street, and I saw a guy with a gun in his hand outside of what we thought was a social club. And I said, they're robbing the social club. This guy's the lookout. So I said to the officer with me, who ironically his name was Pat, I said, Pat, get behind the car. I'm going to sneak up behind them. And I crossed the street. He didn't see us. He wasn't looking in our direction. And as I snuck up behind him, my foot hit the gate security lock on the bottom and rattled the gate. And he turned, and we were not even 2 feet apart at that point, because I was just about to grab the firearm from his hand. And he turned and he fired. The barrel looked like a cannon to me. That's how it looked. And I heard the click. And then he clicked it again. He fired 2 times, and the gun misfired both times. And then he took off running, and I chased him. And it was a summer night, and kids were jumping, jump rope in the street and playing hopscotch. So I couldn't fire him at that point. But when he passed all the kids, now he was running up 146th Street, and it was just him and the street. And I didn't want to shoot him in the back, but I fired a warning shot. Totally against department regulations.
But acceptable given context.
But I never reported it. However, he threw the gun, fell to the floor, and said, I don't have the gun, I don't have the gun, I don't have the gun. And then by that time, Tommy had come up to leave, and he saw, what was going on. He heard the shot. He came running over. What's going on? I said, get the gun, get the gun. So he grabbed the gun, and we always had cuffs on us. We cuffed the guy up. We brought him back to the station. And it turns out he was 16 years old. They weren't robbing the place. It turned out that he had an argument with his brother, and he wanted to shoot his brother in the leg to teach him a lesson. So when his brother was going to come out of the social club, he was going to shoot him in the leg. He bought the gun for $10 on Bradhurst Avenue with the ammunition in it.
Well, that's why it was $10, but it was actually the round. And I think it's important, for our listeners and viewers to understand what transpired. When he pulled, when the lock rattled against the gate, he turned around, he opened fire. 1, 2, boom, boom. So the hammer of the gun, I'm assuming it was a revolver.
It was.
Hit the primer on the bullet, the little center of the bullet, and you had a double misfire. Both rounds misfired.
Not every case that marked Stu Friedman's career was about the moment a gun was pointed at him. Some of the ones that stayed with him longest were about the moment someone else's gun found a target. This is the case he still calls the saddest of his career.
Irma Lazada, the first policewoman ever killed at the time.
I'm going to say that was probably one of the saddest cases I investigated. I mean, I investigated a lot of crimes against children and all, but it's sadness to me because I knew her personally. We were friends. She was a sweet person. She was a very active cop. And, females weren't popular on the job at that time. Popular in the sense that there weren't many. Right. And she was an all-out cop, 100% cop. She was not scared of taking action. She was hurt, and that's how I got to know her. She was working restricted duty because of an injury from work at what they called the criminal intelligence section, which was right next door to my office, which was the major case squad. And we would bring in paperwork to her to track people, to run plates, to, investigative-wise. That's how I got to know her. And she was a very kind person, very nice person. Her reputation was pristine, throughout the entire department. And then she went back to work, and she was working in anti-crime. And her and her partner witnessed a chain snatch, and they took pursuit of the guy, and they decided, this happened out in Brooklyn, in the District 33, which is the East New York area, very tough area. And they split up because they knew that in most cases when they were chasing a person, or I should say a perpetrator, in this area, that they were going to cut across to another street. So our partner went the other way. She took pursuit of the guy, and they were separated. And the radio, as you probably heard in the past, transit radios just never worked. I mean, there were times I called for assistance and I would get a response saying, call by phone. You need assistance, you can't call by phone. And there was pay phones back
Right, and not one of them worked.
then. Right.
No payphone in New York ever worked.
They chased this guy and they got separated, and Irma caught up to him in a weeded lot between buildings. And she was smart. She didn't yell she was a cop. The guy had slowed down from running for so far, distance. So she started calling out a dog, like she had lost her dog. So she used her common sense. And she got close to the guy, and then she finally identified herself. And the guy turned on her, and he grabbed her, and he was able to disarm her. And, she said, don't shoot me, don't shoot me. And the guy shot her. And the first shot struck her in the face and knocked her to the ground, and she fell over. And the guy started to leave. But then something told him to go back. He turned around, came back, and gave it a fatal shot. The first shot would not have killed her. And she died with her shield in her hand, which was important because later on he claimed he didn't know she was a cop. And the unfortunate and sad part about her case was that she wasn't found for hours. Her partner went back to the command. They said, where's Irma? And he said, well, we got separated, but she might have went to get something to eat. So what happened was, on the canvas, we found a woman who had witnessed the entire thing. That's how we knew she was calling for a dog. She was sitting by her window. She said, I saw a girl. She was yelling for the dog. And then I saw the guy confront her. Once the next shift started to come in, you have to account for all the officers. And, where's Irma Lazada? We haven't seen her. So now they notified the precinct, which, transit caught a lot of flack on not notifying the precinct right away. But, it wasn't unusual for partners to be separated and, show up an hour later and say, oh, yeah, I stopped over here or stopped over there. It was just a very sad circumstances. And it was a sad case to me because I knew her personally.
3 shootings. Almost 3 decades on the job. Somewhere in there, Stu Friedman stopped counting the times the city tried to take him off the count entirely. What stayed with him wasn't the danger. It was the people. That's the part of the badge nobody issues you. And it's the part he never put down.